Hey everybody! Today's stories may get a bit controversial. Leave your comments below. Who's right? Who's wrong? In high school, my standard outfit included a backward flat rim baseball cap. One teacher, in the middle of class, called me out. "Op, you need to take off your hat. It's distracting." "What about the 13 other guys in this class with a similar hat?" "Well, it's distracting when a girl wears a baseball cap." I was fuming. Baseball caps on girls are distracting? Fine, I won't wear one. The next class period, I wore a 3-foot tall, red and yellow Joker hat that featured bells, so that if I moved my head at all 16 bells shook. At the end of an hour and a half of bells, the teacher pulled me aside to ask that I go back to my baseball cap. Apparently it was no longer distracting. I'm a pasty white Caucasian guy. I pretty much look ginger, but I'm not a redhead. This is relevant to the story. For almost 8 years, I worked at a popular US chain restaurant which specializes in breakfast food that may or may not heavily feature various flavors of pancakes. Over time, several managers came and went, but the one who stuck around was the ladder climbing, brown-nosing GM, whom we'll call Hope, a narcissistic, verbally abusive, control freak mommy dearest knockoff. Hope had the most grandiose opinion of herself. She had a way of making please and thank you sound like screw you. I did my best to get along with her. Although when dealing with someone who thrives on conflict, the best often isn't enough. She made it clear, it was her way or the highway. Her oft-spouted catchphrase was, "If you don't like the way I run my store, quit." Among Hope's countless trademark annoying traits included, breathing, coming into work wasted and talking smack about everyone to guests and staff alike. She often delivered instructions orders, without allowing any responses, then concluded those interactions with "K?" as if that couldn't get any more obnoxious. Her faux sincerity was almost always accompanied by an annoying crypt keeper cackle. Then she'd roll her crap brown eyes, toss her mouse brown hair over her shoulder and walk away. Funny story. One Christmas, I was unlucky enough to draw Hope's name for the Secret Santa gift exchange. I seriously considered buying her a batch of wire hangers with a card simply saying "no wire hangers ever." I decided against it for the simple reason that it was no secret that I did not like her. It would have been totally obvious who bought her the gag gift. I was one of those highly valued employees, but the way I was treated completely belied the compliments and accolades I received, i.e. my schedule being flipped without my consent, day off requests being denied, while other employees, mostly older married women and single mothers of small children, as well as Hope's drinking buddies, got preferential treatment, always taking the side of the guest when they were angling for a free meal, etc. Perhaps the worst was the bullying and pettiness among certain employees. It was like high school. It got to the point that I flat out refused to exchange numbers with or add any coworkers on social media. It was a rule that I stood by for a very long time. Don't mix business with personal. I've somewhat relaxed that regulation, but for the most part it's still in place. Once, while in the dining room, another employee poked me in the face with a tampon right in front of guests as well as Hope and Sunny, the drunken assistant manager. I filed an official complaint and nothing came of it. This is one such occasion where they couldn't claim ignorance. My complaint made it real and they had to address it. Address it, they did. They saw me as a whistleblower. Neither Hope nor Sunny could have cared less about staff morale. It was typical of both of those embittered hags to accept hearsay as fact. They rarely did their diligence in getting both sides before plotting a course of action. Oh, and plot they did. Unfortunately, the following shows they responded to my complaint to workplace bullying with malicious intent. It was at this point, I began receiving customer complaints. Most of the time Hope and Sunny would take the word of the so-called customer or the server passing on the complaint without offering up any proof a discrepancy had even occurred. I later came to learn the complaints were completely fabricated. It was really a coworker just trying to stir the pot. This whole horror story came to its climax when a cokehead, now former employee, circulated a rumor that I refused to wait on an elderly African-American military veteran because I was a racist. Being one myself, I respect all veterans. I found it alarmingly laughable, at best, because, 1, I am a very gay man, and 2, most of my boyfriends haven't been white. Hell, everyone including Hope and Sunny met my Brazilian ex-boyfriend, who looked black, when he had previously popped in for Sunday brunch. So, you can understand why this accusation was out of character and completely out of the blue. It reeked of sabotage. It was too outlandish to be anything else. So, the write-up came. I was absolutely furious as my suspicions that I'd been set up were confirmed. Both Hope and Sunny would not let me get a word in. I finally got their attention by stating, in a raised voice, that I had a right to have my say. Surprised at my assertiveness, both went slit-eyed and rather smugly said, "Go on." I pointed out to them that all of my guests love me. Several of my regulars are Hispanic or African American and, in nearly 8 years of employment, never once had I been accused of being prejudiced or bigoted. I also pointed out that one of my regulars, a married female African American doctor, if my hands were free, would run up to me, give me a big hug, kiss me on the cheek and hold me so tight I felt like I was being suffocated. Hope and Sunny were having none of it. I also pointed out that the drama-starting liar who filed the complaint against me had been fired because she was caught by Hope snorting cocaine in the ladies' room. Given her predisposition to lie, the validity of her accusation should be questioned and the write-up destroyed. Based off of their surprised expressions, it was clear I had exposed their complicitness in creating a hostile work environment, but they refused to take the bait. Completely done with it all, I flat out bellowed, "I am not, nor have I ever been, a racist." I'm pretty sure the entire store heard me. Then I went for the zinger that lingers: "You have no idea how many black men have been in my bed." You could have heard a pin drop. Diamanda, the Creole prep cook, was walking by the open office door when I let out that line and she nearly doubled over with laughter. There were 2 training managers facing away from us while they were on the computer doing online courses. They almost collapsed onto the keyboard, then turned around looking at me with shocked expressions on their faces. Sunny's face went beet red. Hope's face turned white and her eyes widened. "You know what, Hope? Remember how you said if I didn't like the way you ran things, I should quit? Goodbye." I didn't give them a chance to respond. My shift was about to start in less than 7 minutes. I took off my key fob, laid it on the safe, emptied my apron, put everything in a takeout bag, did an about face and walked out echoing, "Have fun trying to cover my shifts." It was exhilarating and liberating all at the same time. It was like the end of Private Benjamin, when Goldie Hawn walked out of her wedding and threw away her veil, except I've never worn a dress. Just kidding. Yes, I have. Aside from returning 2 weeks later to get my final paycheck, I haven't set foot in there. Backstory: I started working in care of the elderly before I graduated school, at age 17, as a temp worker, and after I graduated I basically worked full-time for several years, finally got a steady employment at age 23. I take pride in my job, and even though I didn't study medical stuff, I've always made sure I know everything I need to know to do a good job, with online classes, certificates, reading up on medications, treatment recommendations, etc. Everything was going well. Despite me having 4 different bosses in the first 5 years of work, no one wants to be the boss here. Economically speaking, it's a sinking ship, since it's government run and dependent on tax money. Then friendly boss, Lena, joins the story. She asked me to move over to a new department the state was now, by law, obligated to provide short-term care. She had previously run the emergency care unit at the local hospital, and she didn't take crap from anyone. She let us workers build up and run the department because, as any good boss should, she realized that we knew better what we were doing, because we were doing it day to day, and what worked best for us, as long as we stuck within the laws, regulations, staff requirements and budget, of course. Everything was amazing for almost 2 years. Every month I did the schedules for all 15 of the workers. I did daily planning for all patients. I was in charge of all documentation, and all new guidelines and protocols being implemented, since the care provided was brand new in our area. Then the day of the great sadness came, when Lena declared that she was leaving, since she'd been offered a job as the head chief of the local hospital. All of us were devastated to see her go, but, I mean, good for her. That's when Super Beach, Kaisa, enters our story. She was already the boss of all the normal elderly care units, whereas I'd worked before. I'd already moved on to short-term care before she was hired as boss, and we had heard exclusively bad things about her. We heard she would always do what she thought was the right thing to do, which was almost exclusively wrong, because she was underqualified, had no experience from the actual work, and was just a tramp in general. Our first staff meeting she told us, "Either you're with me, or against me, and the people who are against me I drown in local lake." Okay. Great start. I then tried to explain to her that with our previous boss we'd worked with trust, since Lena had an understanding that us workers actually know what works best in our own department, and Kaisa instantly shut it down. Kaisa, no, I'm the boss, I set the protocols, I decide how my department's run. Me, yeah of course, but I'm just saying we've been working like. Kaisa, no. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. And so it began. Kaisa started changing the schedules, the protocols, the staff requirements, the daily rehab schedule, the food schedule, not joking BTW, and she lowered the required medical competence to work at our unit. This means there were people working with us who had no prior experience in the job, had no prior experience in the field, barely spoke the language, etc. Keep in mind we had dementia evaluation, palliative care, end-of-life care, stroke rehabilitation and so on. Malicious compliance. Kaisa started to try to micromanage everything we did. Literally everything. She cancelled all the activities we did for the whole business, like pub nights for the elderly, movie nights, summer cafe outdoors, walks, store visits, everything. All without cost to the business. She stated that we're no longer allowed to finish the schedules on our own, and gave us 2 weeks less to finish them, which means we now have 1 week to input the schedule, try to settle it between us 15 people and then hand it to her. She'd finish it and hand it to us the day before it went into effect, and 8/10 days shifts weren't covered, where we were 6 people working the same weekend, supposed to be 3. So I told Kaisa that I've been managing the schedule for years and was happy to keep doing it, and that she'd still have it 2 weeks early. No. I told her that our activities were 100% within paid hours and no strain on the day-to-day normal business and we want to keep doing them. No. I told her that we'd prefer to keep doing things as we'd been doing them for years, because it worked very well. No. Obviously I was pissed. So were my coworkers, but they never spoke up. That was my job I guess. There were a lot of incidents that I'm not gonna bother bringing up, but just imagine that anything we ever wanted to do for our patients or the people in the dementia units, or for the well-being of the staff was just no. One thing that had been consistent since I started working there when I was 17, 27 at this point in the story, is that when you apply for vacation, or any kind of leave, you input the leave request, and then you request a temp to cover your shift, and then you inform your boss that you done both those things. Always been like that. Always. So I did, I requested a day's leave, my mom had a doctor's thing in a town a few hours from here, I input the temp request and then I walked to boss's office and informed her. She loses it. Maybe because Kaisa's boss was there? I don't know, but she starts yelling, telling me that I'm not allowed to request temps, that's her job. I stand there and take it like a good employee, and just say okay. Won't happen again. Big surprise for her when the next staff meeting comes around. There suddenly weren't any staff on the actual ward, and a local politician was sat waiting with her mother, who was being committed to my ward that day, for over 2 hours. I wonder who made sure they were arriving at that time on that day. Smile. I told my boss's boss exactly why there weren't any temps scheduled for the meeting. Kaisa got fired. Will make me smile for the rest of my life. I have a client who is not kind, and I can't help myself when I talk to him. I have no patience for people who aren't kind. 1. Me, hi, is this X? Client, who else would it be? Me, well, I could have dialed the wrong number. Client, I guess so. Client hangs up. 2. Client, where is X? Me, he is in his office, would you like to talk to him? Client, I asked for him, didn't I? Me, no, you asked where he was. Client hangs up. He clearly isn't used to anyone standing up to him, no matter how passively. We will see how far we get during our next conversation. Back in the 90s I worked at a Subway restaurant, and had a friend that would periodically come in for food. We inventoried bread so he did have to pay, but I rang it up as a cold cut, cheapest on the menu, and hooked him up with free everything else. Definitely got his $2.10 worth. One day he decides he wants to try salad oil, so I put a bit on his sandwich. The next time, he asks for more salad oil, so I put more on. This goes on for a couple weeks off and on, he wasn't in every night, and progressively asks me to put more and more oil on. The day of reckoning came when he comes in after work, tells me his order, and says you literally cannot put too much oil on there, and goes off to wash his hands in the bathroom. K dude. You asked for it? I probably had the biggest crap-eating grin of all time on my face as I unscrewed the bottle and dumped the remainder of the oil out all over his sub, folding the corners of the paper up so the pool of oil stayed put. I triple wrapped that sucker and bagged it up. He came out, paid, then sat down. He said nothing, merely stared at it for a few seconds, then started eating. He said not a word, but I could tell was trying not to let me hear him gag. I of course heard everything. Eventually he said goodbye and left. He didn't speak of it outside of work, but the next time he comes in and orders, I go to reach for the bottle and he stops me. Dude, no, you broke me. You win. I was literally pooping oil all night long. To this day he still gags when he thinks about salad oil. So it was 2 in the morning and I, 16, had just finished gaming for the night. I decided to use the washroom so I wouldn't have to wake up to go later. After a few minutes my sister, 13, started yelling at me and pounding on the door. I continued my business and when I finished I calmly left to talk to her. The conversation went as follows: me, why were you yelling at me? S, why didn't you tell me you were taking a crap? I was about to go in and now I have to wait 20 minutes. Me, why wait so long? S, it's gonna smell so bad. Me, I didn't know you were about to go in, I'm sorry. S, you do this all the time. You take dumps at the worst time, always screwing me over. Me, what am I so poised to do? SHT on the floor? S, next time tell me when you are gonna use it so I know. Me, geez, chill out. It's 2 a.m. I didn't think it affected you when I used the washroom. I guess if it matters that much to you then okay, I'll let you know. S, perfect. Malicious compliance activated. Every time I have to use the washroom I always tell her, and I spare no details. If she isn't within talking or yelling range, I call her or text her. I will stop at nothing to let her know when duty calls. The sheer annoyance that is on her face whenever I walk in and pronounce, I gotta take a monster dump is enough to make my day. This has been going on for a week or so, and here are some of my favorite times. Day 1, sister is on FaceTime with 4 other friends in her room. I loudly walk in and shout I gotta go to the washroom. I think it might be a wet diarrhea but I'm not sure, I'll let you know after. Then I left. My sister was mad and yelling at me for embarrassing her in front of her friends. I am pretty sure I embarrassed myself more but whatever. The other people on the call mostly laughed. That must have been a weird talk after. Day 4, it was 4:30 a.m. and I woke up to pee. My sister was sound asleep so I walked in and shook her awake to let her know that the washroom was full. She was too tired to yell then but I got an earful the next morning. That was the day my parents found out about this. Both my parents agree that it's funny and I shouldn't stop. Day 7, she had left to go grab lunch with our dad, so I spam called her at least 10 times until she noticed and when she answered in an obviously irritated voice, I simply stated hey. I just wanted to let you know that I have to pee then hung up. I would have loved to see the look on her face. About 5 years ago I moved into my house and I received an astonishing amount of junk mail for the previous owner. The elderly lady I bought the house from retired and moved south but spent most of her time here. Thus over half her life signing up to every conceivable amount of junk mail and magazine possible. I've moved many times and it never was much of an issue. But the amount of mail received per day was insane. I live in a remote area, low pop, under 1,000 people per town around here. I have a pretty large mailbox on the street. Thing is heavy duty thick steel, plow trucks can throw ice and snow on it all day and it doesn't care. But it's 2 to 3 times the size of a standard mailbox. In 3 days this mailbox would be full. We get the mail once a week. Only thing that is coming in the mail in today's age is a statement that you've already seen online, or some form of nastagram which no one is in a hurry to read, so once a week in today's day and age is pretty reasonable, least for these parts of the world. The amount of mail was so out of control we were losing valuable garage can space and we couldn't always toss out all the mail received due to room in the can. So, I took a stand and used a black Sharpie and wrote return to sender/individual no longer at this address. The postal worker didn't appreciate this extra workload and would leave everything in there untouched. As a result they never checked the mail for new outgoing mail. Anything addressed to us that actually live here would be left at the post office for us to pick up out of spite. The post office was intentionally being lazy and not following the rules. I only know this because I was pissed enough to actually look up the regulations and procedures for this which they weren't adhering to. Anyway, when I called and complained to the postmaster, the postmaster said they would not remove the mail from the mailbox. I said understood. It's a federal offense for me to tamper with someone else's mail. You refuse to take ownership? I have no choice but to place the pile of mail each day on the ground by the mailbox. The postmaster said what I was hoping for, but it would blow all over the place and become litter and you would be fined. My reply: I personally wouldn't be fined, it's not my mail. However, anyone that would inquire about the litter, I would explain your personal position on it despite the responsibilities noted on subsection A paragraph B stating how to handle this situation. How do you think that's going to go? Your call. The postmaster hung up on me. Couple days later, after the mail piled up out there, the postal worker stopped. At first they had one of those little hand claw grabber things, but it just wasn't cutting it due to the amount. Also, it rained its donkey off the night before. Each time they would grab a bit of mail, they have to carry it over their lap, getting water all over their lap. They finally had enough and physically got out and shoveled every last bit of it into a plastic bin and heaved it into the Jeep. That was 5 years ago. To date I've only received 2 to 3 items of mail that didn't belong to me. When I write return to sender, that mail is collected immediately. Never heard a peep from that postmaster again. My husband does a pretty awesome thing by helping every day with the dishes. However, he also neglects to use soap. Dishes are frequently in need of being rewashed. Sometimes there's still a visible layer of grease. It's been a topic of discussion several times. Finally, feeling unappreciated and resentful, he touts that he is the only one doing them, and if I wanted them done right then I should be helping more. He goes on about not even needing the soap and that how he does it is good enough. My dear son, who loves to help, 6 years old, speaks up. Because I have shown him how to do the dishes, he decides he'll offer a free lesson on the spot. Stepping up to the sink, arranging his step stool, he grabs the soap and just pours and pours and pours all over the dishes. This just kills my husband's need for control and his financial sensibilities. That soap costs all of $1 at the dollar store. But my son promises to help him from now on. Across from the kitchen, I applaud his efforts and his consideration. I suggest he uses a tad bit less and he agrees that a cup only needs to be about half full of soap to have enough, or a plate only needs a thin coating across its surface to have enough. From now on, my son checks in on the dishes. He serves as a voluntary informant to my husband when a dish has needed to be rewashed or when my husband is using far too little, in my son's opinion, soap. Being that he is only 6, he has no real sense of portion control, and that probably won't change anytime soon. My husband has gained a willing helper and the dishes are clean. We've gone through lots more bottles of soap. My parents had this problem with a guy parking a tractor trailer on their land. He lives right across from one of their pecan groves. The grove has well-spaced trees all in neat rows, the grass is mowed super short, the ground is really flat. It looks like an ideal place to pull your rig if you don't know better. The ground is so flat because they use mechanical harvesting. Bumps and grooves can cause the machines to leave pecans laying on the ground. A 2-inch deep groove from a big truck like that can hold thousands of dollars of pecans and will until it is fixed. Oh, and you have to get them up by hand. It's a big deal when someone screws with your livelihood like that. So the guy parks there one time. They get it, he probably doesn't understand he is causing so much trouble. Dad goes down, explains the damage he has done, tells him the grove is private property and not to do it again. Dude, we'll call him Dude, agrees, apologizes. Dad goes home, fixes damage midweek. Next Friday there is the truck again, same spot. Dad, not about to put up with this, calls the sheriff department. Cop comes, truck moves. Dad fixes damage midweek. Next week, no truck. 1 week later, truck is back. Repeat complaint for trespassing to sheriff. Dude claims he forgot. He drives over the road and his Home Depot where his car is parked is 30 miles away. It is convenient for Dude to forget because he saves his gas and time by driving his employer's rig and parking it on my parents' land. Also, he doesn't get bailed if his cab isn't clean, no other driver gets assigned his truck. There are plain motivations. Dude clearly does not forget every time he is home, but this is what he claims to the deputies sent out on the complaints. After 7 times the sheriff department is called, he finally gets a trespassing citation. No fine is levied. Drives his car 2 weeks in a row. Following week, truck is back. At this point my dad has fixed this damage so often he is keeping a tractor and blade on the property so it gets done faster and easier. Calls the sheriff yet again. The sheriff himself comes out this time. Truck leaves, sheriff comes to see my dad. Says the enforcement problem is that it is hard to explain to a court the harm when pictures hardly show any damage and dude always apologizes and moves the truck when deputies come. Says getting dude for trespassing under those circumstances is going to be tough but he is on this and will see it through for my parents but his office is 30 miles away, not that many deputies to be out patrolling, etc. And then the sheriff, bless his little elected heart, says, but if there were something different like a theft of services going on. Cue malicious compliance. The next day, signs go up on 80 trees in a row, 8,000 feet, they are 100 feet apart. Semi-parking. $500/hour. Prepay. Violators will be towed. Dude doesn't pay the signs any mind. Dude does, however, pay the tow truck and deputy quite a bit of mind. Comes running and screaming, waving his arms as they are hooking up. Well, before my dad called to have him towed, everything was documented, including having the sheriff himself drive by and take several pictures of the truck parked with the clearly visible signs. Everything is put on hold while dude's employer, who owns the truck, drives out. After 3 hours, dude's boss gives up and writes a check for $7,800 to cover parking and tow truck fees. That actually covered the tow truck, all the repairs, printing the signs, and beer for about a year for my dad's Tuesday poker gathering. Salute. Dude, who still lives there, does not park in the Pecan Grove. His boss payroll deducted his checks for 2 years. In my university, there are usually 2 regular award periods, each at the start of a new term. During them, a ton of scholarships and awards are up for grab. Additionally, throughout the year, there are special scholarship applications because the donors want the money to go out right away. In my second year, one such scholarship opened in December. Its requirements, however, were way more than it's worth. But any free money is good money. The donors offered 4 awards, each valued at $5,000, for the best students in engineering. The eligibility criteria included a 2-page essay on your leadership qualities and community contribution, and 2 letters of reference from professors on top of a minimum 85% degree average. Keeping in mind that this is December, which is the month of finals. Students are incredibly busy studying and taking exams while profs are preoccupied with grading, dealing with leniency requests, and such. Needless to say, there are few students who would, or could, apply. Fortunately for me, I already had 2 reference letters ready for a competition I was in earlier in the year. I only had to ask the profs to readdress the letter, which they happily did. I got the award and the money was applied directly to my tuition account. Fast forward to January's regular scholarship period. When I was applying, I noticed the same special award was reopened for application. My guess is that they didn't have enough qualified students the first time. My initial thought was, oh, I got the award, probably can't reapply. But upon reading the fine prints, there was nothing that prevents me from reapplying. Just to make sure, I sent an email to the award committee, asking about it. Came a short reply email that said just comply with the award terms and conditions. If they didn't say you can't, then go ahead. I saved the entire application instructions and this email, then submitted the same package as last time. I didn't think I would get it again, but I was throwing a squid at the wall to see if it sticks. It did. I got the award and the money applied to my tuition account. On top of all other scholarships, I got a check back, totaling almost $5,000. About 2 weeks later, I got 2 of the same email asking for a bio and a picture to be included on the donor's website. Half an hour after the emails, I got another one that basically said something along the line of, hey, you weren't supposed to apply for and get the same award twice in the same academic year. We will now have to deduct the money from your account, but in a more professional way. I forwarded them the go-ahead email along with the award terms and conditions. In my email, I also politely pleaded with something along the line of, hey, you said I could. I don't have money to pay that $5,000, already spent it on textbooks. It isn't fair to punish a hard-working student for faults not their own. I also responded to the 2 bio request emails separately with 2 different about me paragraphs, that basically humble brag about how hard I worked and how much I deserve the money. A couple days later, I got an email allowing me to keep both awards. They said the admins have advocated to make up the Golden Scholarship category to put me in. In the email, they also have a lengthy paragraph justifying why I deserved it, probably to avoid admitting that they messed up. As a result of this, the general scholarship guidelines at the university were updated to stipulate that no student will be allowed to get the same scholarship more than once during an academic year. Back in high school, we had this history/civics teacher. He was young, and actually gave a poop and tried to make learning about the way Congress and the Constitution work fun. He was a good teacher. Let's call him Mr. President. Mr. Prey was also a little nerdy and loved to get off on technicalities, and while he was cool, he was inflexible about rules that most teachers didn't care about: wearing hats, eating a snack quietly, water bottles. I'm sure he was trying to make some larger point about discipline or structure or something. We had class with him during fourth period, right before lunch, so we were always starving in his class. One day during a break between second and third period, we hear from other students that Mr. Prey is doing an exercise today where he lets the class act as Congress to make a bill to change a rule. He would act as the president with veto power, but the Congress could overrule him with 2/3 of the vote, like the US Constitution states. Of course, periods 1 and 2 shot for the moon with legislation like no final or no more homework, which passed unanimously, but Mr. Prey said sure, I'll take a look, and continued class, at the end revealing that he was pocket vetoing the bills, a chicken crap loophole where the president can just not sign or veto a bill and thus, it would never come to the 2/3 vote. It was a way for us to learn about the president's powers and balance of powers, etc. Anyway, cut to fourth period. With that inside tip, I convinced our class to vote on something he might actually consider: the ability to eat and drink in class. We were hungry AF, after all, and most teachers let us eat in their classes. We draft the legislation, get majority vote, and Mr. Prey receives our bill. You know, in the other classes, I wasn't going to entertain this, but I'm just going to veto this. If you get 2/3 majority vote, it's yours. To which we then re-vote, get the votes, and the rule is changed. Next day, our first day allowed to eat and drink in class, I showed up with 2 coolers and a bag full of plastic champagne flutes, hide them in the back before class. About halfway through class, I stand up, start handing out champagne flutes to the class, and pull out a dozen bottles of ice-cold Martin Ellis sparkling cider, pouring them and handing them out to everyone in my class. What are you doing, Pop? The bill passed. Well, at least pour me one of those. The class erupted in laughter. I poured him a glass of cider, and we toasted to democracy. Mr. Prey was a good teacher. What did you think? What would you have done differently? Share your opinions in the comments. And if you enjoyed the stories, slap that like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.